A very good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us tonight on the evening review. My name is Toiwan Jabela, your host. Tonight I'm joined on the platform by my colleague Mathias Haufiku, who is the news editor of Namibian Sun. And today he followed closely the matter between the Namibia Economic Freedom Fighters and the Electoral Commission of Namibia, which deregistered the party recently, citing some technical issues. Mathias was in court and he's here to brief us about how things went. Thank you, Mathias, for making time. I thought the matter would last longer, but it seems like they wrapped up already today. What transpired?
Yeah, it's always good to be on this end of the show. I think the Electoral Court is busy these days. Because we're heading to climax as far as the political season is concerned. So today in the Electoral Court, it was the matter of NEFF, which is the EC and the deregistration case. So it was heard by a full bench, Judge Masuku, Judge Angula, and Judge Deregistration. So basically, two legal teams fought it out in court this morning. Mainly on jurisdiction, nothing to do yet with the merits of the case. We do know this comes just a few days. I mean, on Friday, the Electoral Court finalized the IPC case, which is the ECN, regarding where they sought the court to grant them an order that ECN should disclose the legal opinion from the Attorney General on the dual candidates issue. ECN, of course, the court ruled in favor of ECN, where the court ruled that it doesn't have jurisdiction to hear that case. So this is where we are also now, with this case of NEFF and ECN. So those were the arguments in court today. So judgment has been reserved until the 8th. ECN's legal team maintains that the Electoral Court is not the right body to hear this matter. And of course, the other legal team, that of NEFF, they are hell-bent on saying that that's indeed the right platform where the matter should be held. It is an Electoral Court after all.
This thing is of the Electoral Court jurisdiction is becoming a bit of a challenge, because I mean, what should it hear if not matters where political parties? Is it confined to electoral results and challenging of those results, or why does it seem to wash its hands when it comes to matters like this?
I think to many of us, we are also perplexed by this. I think it's a new matter in the arena, and it's good that it's playing out in court. Because the ECN always says that as far as the electoral cycle is concerned, there's a pre-election, election, and a post-election phase. So those are all electoral matters as far as elections are concerned. So one ought to think that this is part of the pre-election phase. Hence why these matters find themselves in that court. But according to Friday's judgment on the IPC one of the reasons given why the Electoral Court doesn't have the jurisdiction to hear the case was that the matters of such matters should go to the tribunal, electoral tribunal, and appeals that emanate from that then should then come to the Electoral Court. And that's why you see in court today, Kadila Momo, who's representing NEFF, was arguing that why is it that the Electoral Court can hear matters if ECN refuses to register my party? I can go to the Electoral Court. But on issues of deregistration, there's an argument that it's not the right platform. So those were some of the issues that played out today. But I think it will set good case law going forward as to how this should be, how this should be tackled. And I probably think the framework around the Electoral Court is rather, I still think it's very vague, and there's a lot of ambiguity as to what is an electoral matter. Because, I mean, for any layman on the street, it wouldn't make sense to say the IPC matter doesn't belong in the Electoral Court. Then what is an electoral matter?
Advocate Gerson Narib, representing the ECN, is hell-bent on that argument that that the Electoral Court is not doesn't have a jurisdiction. What is he saying about? Is he the one now proposing that it should have gone to the tribunal first, or does he think that a different court altogether must handle a matter like that?
Yeah, he only believes that matter belongs in the High Court, because in the Electoral Court you have a full bench of 3 judges. So he believes one judge is enough in the High Court to hear the matter. It doesn't belong there.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make, Mathias, of the fact that this flurry of cases involving ECN, because ideally you don't want bad blood between political parties and the electoral body ahead of a very important election like the one in November, because it creates some sort of friction, and you really want the relationship to be as cordial as possible. Is it just democracy in full gear, or do you think that perhaps certain things ought to be done differently?
Yeah, I would say it's democracy in full gear, and at the same time also you'd want a more cordial relationship, like you're saying. I thought ECN started off well with the parties for this cycle. They've had a number of consultative meetings with the parties, and it seemed very cordial. They set up the electoral calendar, and everyone knows what's going to happen on which dates. And one would have thought that ECN would be very much preoccupied with the voter registration that's currently going on. So now there are these issues that are sort of dragging their attention away from that. But of course, parties have it's their democratic right to seek recourse where they are not happy. I think that's one of the processes. Perhaps going forward, these are things that should be ironed out as far as the electoral framework is concerned. There are still various issues that clearly were not discussed during the consultative meetings that they held. One would not know whether it's because ECN didn't provide the platform to the parties, or the parties themselves at that moment didn't bring it up. But they would know best. But going forward, one would really like to go into the election with parties and the electoral management body really on the same wavelength.
Yeah. And just on this case of this specific case, it's quite extraordinary that ECN, with only 5 or so months left, can deregister a political party like that. It's so radical. Of course, 2 parties have been registered. We knew, I think, was it in February or so, when they deregistered some small parties that became sort of vague. They were no longer active. They were not represented in parliament. But for political parties with representation in parliament, and NEFF in particular, or NEFF, have been making a lot of waves with this confrontational approach that they have, especially on labor-related matters. For them just to be deregistered like that, I mean, what do you make of that situation?
Yeah, well, it was a radical move. But of course, parties also have a responsibility to abide by the laws and regulations that are set in place. I think they have themselves to blame. The timing, I think the timing is also, you could say, questionable as to why didn't they do it earlier on. Yeah, so I think on the part of ECN, it's always, time-wise, they should sort of take this action at perhaps when you see that the deadline has crossed. Don't wait for it to really get out of hand. They were supposed to act. I mean, they said, what, this is the 3 years that they've not filed their financials.
Yes.
Why didn't they act earlier on? So now what they've created is room for political conspiracies, where people feel that this is only done because NEFF has been making headways as far as labor matters and so on is concerned. Is it maybe, are they fearful? So now even the ruling party becomes a casualty in all this. I mean, because of course they are the ones running government, to say that this is being done to protect the ruling party. So these are things that could have been avoided if ECN acted already the first year when the financials were not submitted. They had the power then to take this decision. So this actually means For 2 years, taxpayers' money have been going to an institution that was not acting lawfully.
That's a very good point, actually, the last one. So, in the Christian Democratic voice, where is it in all this mess? It seems to be Mr. Gotthard Kandume just got out of parliament, and the last time I heard about him saying anything at all was when we called him as the media, and we said, what is your reaction? And he said, ECN is lying, what. Since then, he has just sort of disappeared into obscurity.
Yeah. Well, he seemed to have made peace with his fate as far as this is concerned. I'm sure this route that NEFF has taken is also a very costly route. The Christian Democratic Voice only has one seat in Parliament. So I can imagine what a case of this nature would do to their financial resources. They're probably piggybanking on NEFF and hoping that they win this, and they could also survive based on that. Yeah.
And the situation around last week something extraordinary happened also at State House. ECN went there. Sophia Shaningwa, Secretary General of SWAPO, was in the meeting, and she was recorded asking questions. It was not bad questions, typically, but you have government leaders on this side, the president and all these key guys. The Deputy Prime Minister was also there, and then ECN on the other side. So it's like a teacher-learner sort of scenario. So these are the bosses, and these guys are sort of learners, if you like. And when questions are being asked in that way, especially by a Secretary General of one political party, while other political parties are not represented, it just gave out a very wrong impression. And I'm thinking now, because you mentioned about how SWAPO became a casualty caught in this crossfire of the ECN and the opposition. So when people start putting all these bits together, it could really give bad impression.
Yeah, that's the nature of the political beast. Your opponents will always try and grasp and clutch on anything that they can get to set out their narrative. I think the State House meeting was a bad PR exercise. ECN, they were simply supposed to really ask the presidency regarding the presence of the Secretary General there, perhaps for her to leave the room. And if the president, if he's really genuine about this democracy thing, and he's concerned about slow voter registration, he could have called all the parties and he meets them with ECN to avoid all this bickering that's now going on. And that only further eats into the credibility of the ECN. That's what it does. And it births all these speculations. I'm not sure how the ECN would get out of this. Of course, they issued a statement, but that's just that. No one really took that seriously, because the evidence is there.
Absolutely. Final question, Mathias. Maybe if you can engage me on. You've been following closely the registration of voters, the pace at which it's happening. The numbers, I think, the last number we got from ECN is just at 1.1 million voters. ECN is targeting 1.6. That's like nearly 500,000 people still to go.
Yeah.
And there's only roughly a week left. What are you picking up in terms of the appetite to register or lack of it, actually? Because, of course, you could say 1 million is a lot of people, but it's still a long way to go.
Yeah, it's still a long way to go. If you look back at the 2019 elections, I think the voter registration stood at about 1.3 million, and only 820,000 people voted. So you have 500,000 eligible voters who did not cast their votes. That's a huge number, considering our population. We still have about 500,000 to go now. We're starting at 1.1, with about a week to go. And I'd like to think that the way we started off the process, it was very lecture-like. I don't think the ECN was aggressive enough. in terms of going out into the communities. As far as you have stations set out, you need to have had real, genuine mobile teams. Because what ECN initially described as a mobile team was having a station at Eero Shopping Complex for a week, and then it moves to Katutura. That's not a mobile station. I mean, the mobile station, one would expect where you see on the national calendar what's really happening. Okay, Namibia, maybe there's a rugby match being played at Hage Geingob Stadium, you put your team there. There's a music festival happening in Katima Mulilo, you post your team. So it's mobile in the real sense. So I don't think we were aggressive enough from the start, and only now are they sort of doing it. You don't see, have you seen them? I'm not sure if they moved around even the pension points and so on, where you really have big crowds gathering. So we left it a little too late, and that's now why we'll be scrambling for the final 500,000 to register. Hopefully we can get a significant chunk of those to register during the remaining days.
Now, the other question, Mathias, is the appetite among young people. I don't know whether these updates that ECN keep putting out, whether they give us any sense of the age demographics, but the feeling generally is that young people are not sharing the same, are not flocking, they are not, apparently somebody was saying the other day that they are very impatient, partly because when they go to the registration points and then they find elders, then they are made to wait. So many of them just say, nah, if the elders are going in front of me, then I just leave. But is there enough appetite? Or, I mean, we also know that they have a lot of problems facing young people here, unemployment and all these things. Do you think they can influence some sort of discontent?
Yeah, I think this is a multi-dimensional problem that we're facing, both from the ECN side and from the youth demographic side. I think if I had to start with the ECN side, I think they're sort of failing to evolve and to harness the technological potential that's there, that they could use during voter registration. Also, I think from a government's perspective, our systems are not really synchronized. If you had perhaps the Home Affairs system, ECN having access to that, those are systems that you can use to make the process easier on.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard young people saying, why don't we do online voter registration? Those type of things, because there is a database like Home Affairs where ECN can verify the applications that they receive of voters. From a young voters' perspective, I'm not sure if it's a fact or perception that young people are the ones that chronically stay away from registering to vote and the voting process itself. But the issue of impatience, I've also heard of it. I think young people should take responsibility. I mean, 70% of the population is under 35. So this is a time for young people to come out, and there's no excuse. Being impatient cannot be an excuse as to why you're not exercising your democratic right. I mean, it's a once-off process in 5 years, which sets the tone for your life. I mean, you've mentioned the issue of youth unemployment, where, I mean, young people are just roaming the streets with their qualifications and all. So where do they expect the change to come from? So I don't think it's the responsibility of the ECN to really force people to go and register to vote. They can sensitize them, but there is the personal commitment that young people should also make to say that, look, I want change for my country and change for myself. This is the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. There is also another challenge. The last major election that we did, we had the electronic voting machines, which of course were outlawed, if you like, by the Supreme Court only after elections, meaning that we are back to square one as far as those long queues are concerned. And I imagine that the queues will be even painfully slower this time around than they were in 2019, for example. Do you think that electronic voting we must find a new way and still go back to that system, at least now with a verifiable trail of results? Or do you think we must just stick to, to manual?
Yeah, it's sad that we're going back again. It's sad that it just shows that we are not keeping up with times. And these are some of the factors that hamper people from coming out in numbers to vote. Because you'd like to have a seamless process. I mean, like earlier on, you asked about the issue of the results, how the results, do they have the categories, these are young people and so on. The system seems to be so fragmented that you'll have to wait a week for ECN to give you results, say how many young people registered. So you don't have a real-time system that's working, and it's very discouraging. But I think the Supreme Law made it easier for, the Supreme Court in 2019 made it easier for ECN just to say, just get the component of a verifiable trail component, and you can proceed with it. But 5 years later, we'll look where we are.
Yeah.
So we have to go back to the ballots, and you can imagine what it will do even to results announcement. I mean, even with the EVMs, we had to wait a couple of days for results. So how long is it now? Still a thing of 7 days? We're waiting for 2 weeks for results again, which then just again fuels the conspiracy sort of machinery to work on overdrive, and you don't want that. Yeah.
The final question to you, Mathias, is last week, Namibian Sun published an article quoting a report by Fitch, the rating agency or one of their subsidiaries there, and it gave a very interesting perspective on how the results of this election would be, saying SWAPO will definitely win, but with a reduced margin compared to the last election. That is their prediction. And but they predict that in the parliamentary election itself, the party would do slightly better than the presidential candidate, Netumana Ndaitwah. And they gave perceptions also around Itula, Dr. Itula, whom they said is the strongest opposition candidate, meaning if that is to be true, they are not even counting the current official opposition party. Well, what did you read into that report?
Yeah, it was interesting in the sense that it sort of confirmed what many have said over the years, to say, is it a thing of our opposition not providing any alternative? And that's why the ruling party kept winning all these years. Because if someone like Dr. Itula could come out of the blue and did what he did in 2019, what stopped other parties from doing it? And what is it that is doing that they are not doing? But of course, our political system is different from others, and there are those who would say there would be a spillover effect of the South African election on ours. I think our political system is it's very different, because in South Africa you have a very robust opposition segment, and I think that's why the results played out the way they did. In our case, you don't quite see that. You would like to see that, because I mean, you want what you call a vibrant democracy, where your opposition really holds the ruling party to account, and if they don't deliver, voters know that they have an alternative to go for. But it will be interesting to see how things play out towards the end of the year during the polls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We leave it there, Mathias, with Mathias Haufiku, my colleague at Namibian Sun, who is just giving us reflections on how the court case involving the Namibia Economic Freedom Fighters and the Electoral Commission of Namibia went, and of course also commenting on related topics as far as elections in November are concerned. Thank you for watching.